Good morning, everybody. This is James Morris. Welcome to our show. It's Tuesday morning, and this morning, I want to talk kind of about common problems I see that do-it-yourselfers do that they make mistakes that can be avoided. And one of the most common mistakes I see out there is people changing parts and not putting the parts on correctly. Plug wires, perfect example. I don't know how many times a week I have a car that comes in, someone's performed their own tune-up on, the car comes in rough and it's misfiring on two cylinders. I see it's misfiring on two cylinders, go out to the car, if it's got a distributor, and move two spark plugs around, the misfire goes away. Very common problem. That's the easy fix. Things that are not, unfortunately, the easy fix that ended up damaging catalytic converters because, well, I guess what happens is they removed the plug wires all at one time and went back and just tried to figure out how they went. And you don't do that. So when you're changing plug wires, please, 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 please change one plug wire at a time. Take the old one off, put the new one back on. Do that and you'll be much better off. You won't have the problems because this person, even though it was a simple mistake and didn't cost a lot of money to correct the problem, a plug wire, the problem is they've just destroyed a $300 to $500 catalytic converter on that bank due to misfires. Nothing I can do about it short of replacing that catalytic converter. That's a perfect example of owners causing their own problems. And I see this often. Another mistake I see is people who do brake jobs. The worst brake job I ever saw was a person put pads on there instead of putting the pad part against the rotors, had them backwards where the metal part was against the rotors. That's the worst I've ever seen. But so yes, it does happen. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Common sense doesn't grow in everybody's tree out there. But brake pads or brake shoes. Brake shoes, that's a little bit more of a challenging problem than changing brake pads. Brake pads, you push the piston back in, you remove the pins or whatever, and you change the pads. Not very complicated, but it's good to do one side at a time on the brake pads or shoes. That way you can look at the side you tore apart, and if you forget how it goes back together, go to the other side and look at it and go, wait a minute, now where was that tensioner at? Where was that spring at? And you can see. So do brake pads one side at a time. Another thing I see when people do brake pads is they don't change the rotors. Big mistake. What you end up doing is you're putting the flat pads, they're flat, and you're putting them on concave rotors. The rotors are actually more wore out in the middle than they are on the edges. So when you put a flat pad on it, you're actually making contact. This is exaggeration with my hand. You're actually making contact just on the bottom and the top. The middle's not even touching. So for the first, I'd venture to say first 500 to 1,000 miles, you're not making full contact. Plus, it's going to make your pads chatter. They're going to get hot and it's going to raise the resins that are in this pad itself. And they're going to sound terrible. That's that brake noise we all hear when someone drives up to the bank or into a drive-through and you hear this ee. Well, brakes aren't supposed to make noise. I talk about that all the time. I have people call up, well, my mechanic says they're all supposed to make noise. Well, they might make noise the first time you hit them backing up or going forward. That's normal if you're knocking rust off. Very common. But the high-pitched squeal, that like fingernails on chalkboard, that's not normal. I don't care what they tell you. If someone's telling you that, they're telling you a non-truth. Let's put it that way. They're not supposed to make noise. What makes noise is vibration. Like fingernails on a chalkboard. Well, the same thing's happening, but the pads are actually vibrating on the rotors or vibrating inside the calipers themselves because the spring tensioners, they're stainless steel tensioners and they're hold things tight. Well, they've gotten old or they've gotten wore out or they've been reused. You shouldn't reuse your hardware over again. Hardware should be changed every time you change your pads. And when you buy a set of brake pads, you'll get good, better, and best. The goods never have brake hardware in it. The better sometimes does. It's kind of hit and miss. The best always has hardware with the pads to change. So make sure you change the hardware, make sure you change the pads, make sure you change the rotors. I know you're sitting out there going, I don't need to change the rotors. Yeah, you do need to change the rotors. You got 45 to 65,000 miles out of those last set of brakes. How many miles do you want to get out of this set of brakes? 15, 20, 30,000 miles? Well, I think you want more. You want to get the same amount that you did on the original ones. You're not going to if you don't do the job right. You really must change the rotors. You really must change the hardware. And I recommend when a car has over 100,000 miles on it, start thinking about changing the calipers. Normally by the time you get 100,000 miles on a vehicle, you're approaching your third brake job. Not always, but by the time you get to your third brake job, you're going to find out, what I found out is things start to get sticky. Things don't work right. Calipers don't respond like they're supposed to. They'll go out, but they won't come back in like they're supposed to. Remember, there's no springs to pull a piston back in on a caliper. You know, you're pushing down the brake pedal, it squeezes the rotors, the pads against the rotors to stop the vehicle down. And when you let go, it just that little bit of just a square cut edge of the seal that holds the piston in there, that fraction of an inch pulls back the pad. Well, unfortunately, over a period of time, there's no square cut seal anymore that has any ability to pull it back. It just makes it sit there and rub against the pads. That's why you get those, your wheels turn black. You've seen these cars that the front wheels look like, you know, the back wheels look nice and pretty, but the front wheels are covered with brake dust. That's the reason, because the calipers are letting the pads ride against the rotors constantly, and or they got the cheapest brake pads they could find on there. Those may be two of the reasons out there. So those are a couple of the things I know that do-it-yourselfers do, that please think about doing it correctly, or just don't do it. I mean, why waste your money doing something that's going to be half done? Do it right, or just don't do it. Yes, I know rotors cost money, but it costs about the same amount of money to replace them as it does to cut them. Yeah. For the amount of money, it takes about an hour labor to cut a rotor, and for that kind of money, you can replace a rotor. So replace your rotors, and if you don't replace them, at least get them cut and put a non-directional finish. And no matter if they're new rotors or cut rotors, wash them with hot, soapy water. Failure to wash them with hot, soapy water is an invitation to have more brake noise than you can possibly imagine. Trust me, I've seen people, I've had my guy sit there, do a brake job, and I say, okay, I'm going to go over and check it. Now look at the brake rotors, and they're just as shiny and pretty, like they came out of the box. I said, you didn't wash these rotors. And they look at me and go, you're right, I didn't. I said, take them back off and wash it with hot soapy water. Don't you have any brake clean? No, I don't use brake cleaner. Take them back off, put them in the sink, hot soapy water, scrub them, and when you pull them out and rinse them off, by the time you get them back on the car and buckled up, they should start to rust. If they're not rusting, they're not clean. Rusty rotors do not indicate bad rotors. That's a common thing. I have people all the time, well, my rotors are rusting. Well, they do that. They're steel. They will rust out here. This is the high humidity area. It's not like California where it's very dry. It's very high humidity here and things are going to rust. That's how we know we got the rotors clean, got all that cosmoline off of it, which is a clear protectant to keep them from rusting, because no one wants to go to the parts store and buy brand new rotors that look rusty. I mean, I wouldn't want to. You know, but I know that in order for me to make this job right, those rotors have to be clean to where they're starting to rust. And I have to, you know, and that's a very common problem. I have some people out there, we don't need to cut, you don't need to wash them. And I go, well, what do you think happens to that cosmoline over a period of time? It gets into your pads. So wash it off. That way it won't get into your pads, contaminate your pads, and cause it to make brake noise. It's like little phonograph needles inside the brake pads. That's what I'm trying to say. They actually ride that rotor, and you get this ee. They actually will ball up, like raising the resins to the surface. The same thing will happen with the cosmoline. It's on the surface of the pad until it completely gets out, burns off, or whatever. And it may not burn off. It may get embedded into the pad. I don't know. I just know that when I get one that's making noise, I take the pads off. I scuff them completely off. I take the rotors and either replace the rotors or clean the rotors. If they're brand new and make noise and they're not warped, I just take them off and clean them and scuff the pads and put them back on. If the rotors are brand new, if the rotors are old, I don't even reuse the pads. I just replace everything, because once those pads get put back on and you drive the car to try to bed them into the rotor, when you put new rotors on there, they're bedded into the old rotor. It's not going to work. You're not going to be happy. It's going to be NQR, not quite right. And that's what we're talking about. We're trying to make sure that when you do a brake job or tune-up or whatever it is, you do it right, or just don't do it. I know that sounds hard. You know, it sounds kind of what your mama used to tell you. If you're going to do something, do it right, or just don't do it. Too many times I see people that come in with half-completed brake jobs. You know, they think they did a brake job. They threw a set of pads on. I don't know why my brakes make noise and it pulls to the right. Well, the right calipers right calipers sticking on you. You put new pads on old rotors. The wheel bearings are loose. You didn't change the brake fluid. The brake fluid is green and brand new. It's supposed to be clear, and that means it's full of moisture and full of copper. Those things, what makes the difference between a no return brake job and a brake job that's going to drive you crazy. You're going to be married to it. I would be married to it if it came here to my shop to work. I have to take care of it. So that's one of the things I try to tell people: do the job right, or just don't do it. And we talked about doing spark plug wires. That's very, very important. You do spark plug wires correctly, one at a time. Do brake pads one at a time. Do one side at a time. That way you can see how the other side looks. Same thing on brake shoes. Brake shoes are a little bit more complicated because they got a lot more springs, a lot more parts, and people sometimes get intimidated. I've got Joe, and I only got a couple minutes left, on a TPMS, tire pressure monitoring system. Joe, what's your question about your TPMS?
Yes, James, do the systems do one go out at a time or two at a time? How do those things go out?
Well, what happens is they work on batteries. They get activated when you drive the car. They get turned on. When you shut the car off and stop driving, they shut off and go to sleep. They only last about 5 to 7 years before they go bad, and you end up replacing them. And you need to replace them all about the same time. So if one goes bad, the other 3 are right behind it. But if you have a Toyota, there's 4 more. There's a total of 5 on a Toyota.
Well, what about a Nissan?
Nissan has 4. They don't have one in the spare tire that I'm aware of. But any shop can be able to tell you that by taking their tool and walking around and pinging the tires on the car. Any tire shop, a shop like mine, any shop can tell you if you've got sensors in it. But if your car is more than 5 years old and you got a TPMS light on it and you got the right amount of air in it, be prepared to change all your sensors.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot.
You're very, I hope that points you in the right direction, sir. And if we can help you out at James Auto Center, come on by here. We'll be more than happy. We do that kind of work.
Thank you, James.
You're very, very welcome. Thanks for calling, sir. That's what we do here in the morning. We try to help people get answers to questions. Well, they may not seem important to you, but they're important to them. That's why they call. And some people out there say, that's an important question because I always wondered about why I'm getting that tire pressure monitoring light on too. And my tires aren't that old. Well, it's a sensor that's bad. And what it does, it registers the amount of air you have in your tire. And if you have too low of air, it makes the light come on. The law makes it come on when it's 10% below the amount of air that's supposed to be in there. Unfortunately, a lot of people drive around till they see that light. Then they check their air pressure in their tires. The name of the game is check your air pressure before you see that light come on. It affects your gas mileage. It affects your handling. It affects the light, how long the tires live, how they wear. So check your tire pressure. Don't wait on a light to come on. That's another little mistake out there I see people do. They wait till they see that red light or that yellow light or that whatever light it is. Be proactive. Don't be reactive. Be proactive. Stay on top of your fluids. Stay on top of checking your maintenance. And your car, you'll wear the seat out before you wear the car out. Hey, this is James Morris. Thanks for watching. We'll be back in a minute. I don't know who's going to call, so give us a call at 850-763-0555. We'll be more than happy to answer your car question.
If you want the best deal in town for tires, you need to call Baytown Tires at 873-8900.
Hanson and the guys at Baytown Tires take pride in serving Panama City for over 20 years. Baytown Tires on Highway 98 in St. Andrews. All service work backed by a nationwide warranty.
Water is too powerful to fight alone. Mr. Router Plumbing. Sink, shower, and toilet emergency drain services.
Part of what I'd like to let you know is what we do and how we work our system. Basically, we've got about 700 stocking dealers scattered around the 15 counties here in the Big Bend area of the state. I run a fleet of trucks, vans, and what we call hotshot vehicles to deliver to our dealers quickly so they can help service you as fast and efficiently as they can. Provide timely and efficient service, and we're there to take care of our dealers who in turn can take care of their customers.
All right, welcome back to our second part of our Tuesday morning show. And my wife has a question that she said people ask all the time.
Oh yeah, I got another email this morning. A gentleman's got a question about a rear main seal leak. So it seems that, and we hear this a lot, most every time a customer comes in from another shop complaining of an oil leak, a rear main seal, it's not always a rear main seal.
True. First thing is, on leaks, you've got to figure out where the leaks are. Okay, we got agreement on that. You got to figure out where the leaks are before you can fix it. Well, the first thing you fix the leaks up top.
Well, so many people just see the
The
drip,
bottom.
the drip at the bottom,
yeah.
and don't realize that oil runs from the top down. Usually it's valve covers
Well,
leaking.
valve covers are a big problem out there. Oil sending units are a big problem out there. A lot of people don't realize. We had a customer came in last week, matter of fact. He was pretty sure it was a rear main seal because they were putting oil pan or rear main seal. That's the first thing he said of it. And it was a 2008 model, a Ford truck, four-wheel drive. And I looked underneath it and I said, well, the car's sitting here idling and I don't see anything really leaking too bad. Let me wash the car off. And I washed the car off, went for a ride, came back, no rear seal leak. I went, nothing on the top, nothing on the valve covers. Started looking. I said, well, about the only place I can think of that would be even close would be the oil filter, the oil sending unit. Well, the oil sending unit had a cap over it, a rubber cup over it. Well, I took that rubber, hard to get to on this model, took my screwdriver and knocked the cup off, and oil just poured out. I said, I have found the leak. Well, it only, with a $45, $50 repair versus a $1,000 repair. That's a lot cheaper. The customer was pretty sure he's going to have to pull the transmission out of the engine to fix the leak. All he had to do was change the oil sending unit. So first thing is, wash the engine off, verify where your leaks are, fix the leaks at the top first. Don't be fixing the rear main seal if you got a valve cover that's showing evidence of a leak. Always start at the top and work your way down. This is all I do. Go buy you a gallon of Purple Power from the parts store. Yeah, Purple Power. It's just soap. It's a really good soap, biodegradable. Spray your engine with it. I'm talking about just spray everything where you see grease on it. Just spray, and 100% concentration. It'll break that grease down. Then take a water hose and with a water nozzle that's got some pressure to it. We're not talking about a car wash nozzle. We're talking one that's going to have really super high pressure, but one that you're washing your garage floor with. That'll be just fine. Wash off your engine. And when you got the engine washed off, I use a dye. I use a dye that I buy at the parts store. It costs like $3 for an ounce of dye, and I have what looks like shooting glasses. They're yellow glasses, and I take a black light. And I can usually spot the leak once I put the dye in, go for a drive. Well, let me back up. Before I put the dye in, before I do anything, after I wash the engine off, because believe it or not, oil has a dye in it. Just oil that you buy. If you take a black light to it and you just look at it, you think it may be leaking, and it's not. So wash the engine off really, really good. Put your glasses on. Get your black light and look before you add the dye. See what it looks like. See what the engine looks like. You'll be surprised how things look when you put a black light to them. Some things, you wouldn't think glow. It is. That's kind of amazing. Some of the things, like some connections, I put connectors on there and go, man, that thing turns green when I put a black light on it and see it with my yellow glasses. But anyway, take a look at it before you add the dye. See what the engine looks like, top and bottom. Then put the dye in the vehicle. Go for no more than a 2 to 3 mile drive. If you go any more than that, you're going to have a mess on your hand. I'm just telling you from experience, any more than 2 or 3 miles, you're going to have a mess if you got a serious leak on your car. Come back, put it back on the lift, turn the lights out, get your yellow glasses on, get your black light, and start looking. Start at the top of the engine. Look at the valve covers, look at the oil sending unit, look at anything that has oil going through it, intake manifold, valve covers, anything. Look for leaks, rear main, look, and then start working your way down. And then see if you see any leaks. If you don't see any leaks, go drive the car another 2 or 3 more miles. Do it till you see where the leak is. Don't do it one time and stop, and then drive the car with a dye in it and then take it to a shop a week later and you got dye everywhere and tell them, put dye in it, you should be able to see where it's leaking. Well, you got dye everywhere and we can't figure anything out then. We have to wash the engine off, start all over again. That's what we have to do, because normally by the time we see it and people put dye in it, we got dye from the rear bumper all the way to the front bumper. It's all underneath the car. So take a look at it, find out what's going on, and then get it fixed right with a guarantee. Sometimes sometimes oil leaks are not that easy. Sometimes oil leaks are due to a wore out engine. That's right. If the engine has a lot of play in the crankshaft, the rear main seal is not going to leak. It's not going to stay. It's going to leak out. Sometimes even if it's a wore out crankshaft where there's up and down play, or if you've got General Motors has a problem with the rear main seal. It's a plate that actually holds the rear main seal. That plate itself is porous. Not that the rear seal's bad, it's the rear plates. You can put a rear seal in there brand new and it won't leak. It's the plate that holds the seal that leaks, so they tell you to take that plate off, completely seal it with silicone, stick it back on. That's how they tell you to do it. There's a lot of different sealing procedures out there that people aren't quite aware of. Most of today's cars, oil pans, I shouldn't say most of them, a lot of oil pans out there, a lot of transmission pans, a lot of valve covers, a lot of timing covers. A lot of parts are put together with silicone. There's no gasket. Honest, I'm not making this up. They're squeezed together with silicone, and it makes a difference on what kind you use. A lot of people out here like to use black, and there's nothing wrong with the black silicone. It's a pretty good silicone. As a matter of fact, I know a lot of shops that's all they use. But really, you shouldn't use black on everything because certain cars require less flexibility, such as import cars require ultra gray. You can use ultra black on most American cars without any problem, but you can't use it on import cars. That's why import cars have so many bolt holes, is because they have less flexibility. They make sure things don't leak, and so they have more bolt holes, so they need a different type of silicone. So ultra gray is what we use on differentials. Ultra gray is what we use on, I use ultra gray just about on everything because to me it does a better job of sealing than ultra black. I don't use the ultra red or ultra blue or any of those other different colors out there because why have so many different colors when one seems to work quite well? And ultra gray it doesn't cause problems with oxygen sensors where certain other silicons will cause problems with oxygen sensors. I've seen people put silicone on vehicles, and as soon as they put them in there and plug the car and get it started up, that car runs rich constantly. They can't figure out what's causing the car to see rich, and it tries to drive it lean when it does, and it causes all sorts of drivability problems because that silicone has not properly cured. It's not properly been put in there, and you've got too much of it in there, or it never ever cures. That's why I like using the ultra gray. It will cure, and it doesn't cause problems with my oxygen sensors. So make sure the silicone you're using for sealing surfaces is oxygen sensor safe. Don't buy the cheapest out there. Just, hey, you get a bottle over here, that's $2.10. This one over here it's $6. Let me buy the $2. No. Don't buy the more expensive because make sure it's oxygen sensor safe. Too many people work on engines, bring them to me after they've put all this time into it, and sometimes I have to tear them all back apart again to scrape all that stuff off. I've had valve covers come in here. I had to take it all back apart again. I took my 5-gas machine and put it in and went, holy moly, what's going on in here? I pull it apart and I see they got a mess inside there. So, it takes some, sometimes you have to figure these things out. But that's why I'm saying for sealing surfaces, make sure you use the right material. We're talking about leaks out there. A lot of times people will fix the wrong leak. I had one guy come over here one time. He says, I've had 3 shops look at it trying to fix the leak, and they sent me to you. They said you're a leakologist. I said, I don't know about being a leakologist, but I know how to fix leaks. You have to start at the beginning. Wash the engine off first. Take a look at it with a black light and yellow glasses to see what it looks like before you add the dye after you've washed the engine off. This is the step that gets a lot of people messed. They don't do that. And then when they put the dye in, they think they see where a leak is, and it's not leaking because it normally glows. There's certain things on a car that will glow under a black light that you wouldn't think glow. So please, check it out with a black light after you've washed the engine off. Look at it with a black light with your yellow glasses. Put the dye in it. Drive it no more than 2 to 3 miles. Come back. Look for get it in a dark place where you can look for leaks. If you don't see a leak, drive it again. Drive it till you see a leak. Most oil pans will only leak when driving. If you got an oil pan leak, they will only leak when you're going forward and back. They'll slosh out, slosh back, they'll leak. Rear main seals will leak sitting still. You don't have to drive a rear main seal for it to leak. Valve covers will leak sitting still. Oil pans, like I said, usually don't leak unless you drive them. That's one of the things. If you got a car and you can't determine if it's an oil pan or rear main seal, wash it off, start it, and let it idle. If it leaks, and you're pretty sure the leak is coming from between the engine and transmission, the odds are it's a rear main seal or the area that holds the rear main seal, like we were talking about that plate on General Motors cars. But if it doesn't leak and you let the car run for an hour and there's no leaks of oil, now go drive it. If you come back and you got oil all over it, that's an oil pan because you sloshed it forward and sloshed it backwards. That's how I determine what I'm looking for. Oil pans only, remember, they're catchers. There's no pressure on it, so they're holding 5 to 8 quarts of oil. So if you stop at a red light, it sloshes forward. You take off, it sloshes back and forth. They actually have baffles in the oil pan to keep it from sloshing, but it sloshes a little bit anyway, and it does. That's how we tell if it's got an oil pan leak. Like I said, we let one idle for an hour, and we don't see any leaks, and nothing's dripping on the floor. Then we come back and drive it, and we got oil everywhere. That's an oil pan. That's usually what that is. I see that before, and it's not as common. It's not as uncommon as you think, and it's not as common. It's some of those things that we see on certain cars normally that have a molded rubber seal, like Ford's. It's a one-piece seal that comes all the way around, and over a period of time, that seal will swell and split. I've seen that happen, and then people try to tighten them up. And when you do that, that's it. Once you put a wrench on them trying to tighten them up, you're never going to make them stop leaking. You're going to make them leak worse once you tighten them up. They're not trying to just trust. If your oil pan's leaking, trying to tighten it up only makes it worse. So don't tighten it up. If you think that's what's wrong with it, oh, my oil pan's leaking, let me put a wrench on it. Don't do that, because if that was the oil pan gasket that's been on there since day one, you're only going to make the leak worse. By tightening up, you're going to split it even worse. So get it looked at and get it fixed. I kind of hope that points you in the right direction on oil leaks and sealing and silicons to use out there. But remember, there's no harm, there's no dishonor in actually going and researching how something works before you work on it. Too many people work on things without understanding how they work. If you don't understand how something works, how can you fix it? If you don't understand how it works, it's like fuel pumps. If you don't know if a fuel pump's bad, if you don't know how much pressure a fuel pump's supposed to put in, or how much volume it's supposed to have, how do you know if it's bad? I see that all the time. Well, my fuel pump pumps. Well, how much does it pump? What do you mean, how much does it pump? It pumps. Well, how much pressure is it? Well, I don't know. How much volume is it? I don't know. You can have a fuel pump that works, but it doesn't work correctly. It's not going to make the car run. As simple as that. So understand what you're working on will actually make your job a lot easier when you're trying to do diagnostics or trying to do drivability studies or trying to do that get that check engine light that's been staring at you for the last 2 weeks, and your wife says, I'm tired of that check engine light, and you went and put a piece of black tape over it, and she wasn't real wild about that. So take the black tape off, get it fixed right, and be done with it, because if you don't fix it right, it's going to cost you a lot more money later. Trust me on that. People who leave check engine lights and ignore them end up destroying catalytic converters, and I do mean destroy them. An average catalytic converter runs about $300 to $400 installed. That's on an American car. And some cars have as many as 4 catalytic converters on there, like some BMWs and some Fords out there, and some of the BMWs are like 3